Okay? Last lecture of the series concerning Kabbalah and Zohar. So as usual, I will start with Kabbalistic invocation to ask angels and other spiritual beings to join us. Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to gather together, to draw together, to form a in Berea, working for the time that will come for them to incarnate in physical body. Now, when the man dies, his soul goes to Yetzirah, and depending on how he lived his life, it goes either to higher place in Yetzirah or to lower place in Yetzirah. Higher place is very close to heaven, and lowest place is called Gehenna or hell in Christian language. Now the question arises, when this child is born here, he needs a soul which is now coming from Yetzirah, from this storage of souls. The question is, which soul he will get? He will get soul which is close to heaven, very divine soul with divine aspiration, or he will get soul from close to the hell, which has tendency to be, be rogue, etc., not to do anything useful. So which soul he will get? We don't know, yes? Okay. You remember story about Jacob. He served his uncle Laban 7 years for the first wife Leah and 7 years for the second wife Rachel. And when they will discuss how much he will pay for the second 7 years, he said, I don't need anything, don't pay me anything. I just will get from the sheep and goat I am taking care, I will take those which you don't like, which are spotted or stripes, which are not one color. And one color goats and sheep were very valuable, much more than those with spots and stripes. Noticed that when sheep or goats come to drink water in the pond or stream, usually at that time mating occurred. So what he did, he took a bunch of sticks, some white, some dark color, and he made strips on the other side of the stream so that goats and sheep, where they conceived, they saw those strips. And because they saw the strips, it was in their minds at the time of conception. He figured out by observation that then their descendants, basically little goats and little sheep, they were striped, or they have spots at least. And in this way, he managed within 7 years almost transferred almost all members of this herd he was taking care for into tribe and sheep. So it means that basically he took from his uncle all what he had, and it belonged to him. And surprisingly, I have not seen any rabbi writing any, not even in Talmud, they don't find that somebody picked on it. What is point here? Basically, he demonstrated clearly, story tells us what woman has in mind during time of conception that affects the children, that affect descendants. And as I said, as far as I know, no rabbi, no Talmud picked on that. But of course, it was too tempting for rabbis of Zohar, right? So they developed their theory and presented basically their observation, and which says that whatever is on mind of parents at the time of conception, that determines which soul from this scale from hell up to divinity, which soul will be incarnated in that body which will be formed from that conception. And Rabbi in Zohar, they spent considerable time trying to explain it and trying to discuss it really in long sentences and long paragraphs. And I believe there's one secret which I believe not many rabbis taught in their temples. However, this is way how drastically to improve future generation of mankind. If parents will be able to sanctify themselves during time of intercourse, thinking of God and praying to God, rather than being subjected to animal lust, coming from their feeling of pleasure. If parents would be able to do that, we will get very high soul incarnated, and in 2-3 generations it can change mankind, because souls really highly aware of spirituality will be born in this way. In today's situation, you have, I don't want to say that the majority, but last part of children are born as unintended consequences of pleasure-seeking sex, right? They are just, consequences of the lust of the parents. And then they become parents themselves. Of course, again, they will have no spiritual knowledge. And cycle goes on, and we get more and more people from close to hell being incarnated in our world. So that's something which I believe Rabbi of Zohar discovered. However, major stream of Judaism basically put Zohar on back shelf, and anything concerned with spirituality was basically forgotten. Until, I believe, few decades ago, right? Because currently, it seems to me at least, that people are more interested in spiritual things than like 50 years ago. I remember 50 years ago, as I was driving through Santa Fe, I stopped in this big bookstore which does not exist anymore, and I asked them 50 years ago, do you have some book on Kabbalah? No, they did not have any. Today you go to bookstore or you look on internet and you find how many hundreds books of Kabbalah, right? Many of them are just the repetition of same thing without any major new insight. So most of the book of Kabbalah just repeat what they read and write it with little bit different style. So best study of Kabbalah is really to go back to original sources, to Cordovero, to Lutzatto, etc. So for that, I wanted, this picture before I erase it, to use it, because I think that's important thing. Now, in general, Zohar basically shows us one thing, that nothing is taboo, nothing is out of possibility of discussion. They take many things from Torah and from Talmud, and they basically turn upside down teaching of major stream of Judaism at that time, which is basically rabbinic Judaism even today. So I would say major lesson from Zohar is, don't be afraid to discover in everything new insight, new interpretation. Rabbi of Zohar, they say, God in heaven rejoices with each new interpretation of Torah, with each verse of Torah, where you find new interpretation still within the framework of Judaism. It's provide God with great delight. And it applies not only to Torah and Talmud, it equally applies to Zohar. Because you cannot teach other people, find new interpretation of everything else except our word, right? You cannot say that Zohar should not be touched, or that Zohar is perfectly correct last sentence. It is not. It is like Torah, like Talmud. So Zohar also needs new interpretation, at least each second generation. Now Zohar introduces new concept of God. We have already heard about Ein Sof. But this new interpretation of God, or new understanding of what God, creates considerable difficulty. If I have, let us say, God here, and I have me, let us say here, so that's God and that's me. I have kind of duality. God is somewhere there above the clouds, unapproachable or approachable partially, and I am here below. And then I pray to God, and God loves me, so He answers my prayer, etc. So God is somewhere above, and I am here. And neither Torah nor Talmud is trying to understand the question, what is God really? He never touched on that. What is described in Torah is just relation and contact between man and God. But it never tries to solve the question, what is really God? And through generation, we have developed our own image of God, right? Many of you pray. How do you pray? What is your image of God? To whom or to what do you pray? And through the generation, we got picture, or some people got picture basically that God is this old-fashioned, some old man sitting on the throne with white hair He's like they describe also in the vision of prophets, right? Like old men sitting somewhere above cloud in heaven. And so we use, I believe the majority of us, maybe at least some, we use the same picture of God in the form, more or less, form of man. To him we pray and he answers our question. And Zohar said there's really childish idea to do things like that. It has nothing to do with God, according to Zohar. And Kabbalist, really. So they introduce different picture. It is like this, that this is God. But now I am somewhere here. Kabbalist and Zohar said God is Ein Sof. It means he is one without end. He is infinite. Infinite in all direction and infinite in time. And they say, before the creation, what was there? Only Ein Sof, nothing else. And everything was Ein Sof and everywhere. And they say, after creation, they said exactly the same. Since God is infinite, it means he is everywhere. There is no place where he is not. And since he is everywhere, they say that everything is God. Then you are here, you are God. And to whom you pray? To God somewhere? You are God, they say. So whom you pray? But I believe that, I believe that this is really kind of problem, because intellectually we agree, I believe everybody, that God is infinite, that he is everywhere. But when we pray, we still have tendency to put God somewhere and pray to him. So I myself, I am using this picture as well as this picture. I am using both alternative. I am not saying that something you should do, but I have tendency, intellectually, I believe in this picture. All right? But in practice, when I pray, I still somehow switch to this old-fashioned image. So question is, what is God? Is he like this, or is he like that? Okay, and I would say he is both. Now, let us make it clear a little bit. 200 years ago, we had physicists, very bright physicists, the best physicists. They were arguing whether light is wave or whether light is stream of particles called photons. And physicists did experiment. One group did experiment showing that light is stream of photons. The other group did experiment showing that the light is wave. Difference is, let us say, waves for interference patterns when there is a diffraction on the slit, let us say, or on the opening, etc. So they could not decide which one is correct. Wave in principle is infinite, but stream of particle is clearly defined as particle in space. So that was 200 years ago. Then 100 years ago, again, physicists discovered that stream of electrons, which are definitely particles, behave like a wave. It shows interference patterns again. So 100 years ago, physicists were arguing among themselves concerning flow of electrons or flow of neutrons, etc., whether it is flow of particle or wave. And then came, in about 1920, 1930, development of quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanics, from formalism of quantum mechanics, follows that stream of electrons basically is both. That in some situation it behaves like a wave, and in some situation it behaves like stream of particles. And same is for light. In some situation light behaves like stream of particles, of photons, and in other situation behaves like a wave. And even today, majority physicists accept today that we have this duality of particle and waves, and they are connected, you cannot separate them. But there is a small group of physicists which argue even today that that's wrong, that particles are stream of particles, and another minority group of physicists arguing that it is just waves. So it is similar, arguing between infinite God and physically located God. And in physics, most of physicists accept that basically this is description of the same phenomena, and that reality under definite experiments behaves like stream of particles, in another experiment as a wave. And so I believe the same is true of God. Whether God is infinite wave, which is everywhere, like Zohar and Kabbalah is teaching, or whether God is separated entity which under definite condition can be separated from this wave and occur as concentration in definite amount of space. So I found his justification, at least for what I am doing in my practice, that I believe that God is everywhere, but at the same time, during the prayer, I have to switch into this picture because I am not sure, I would say yet, maybe next year I will know how to pray in this image. But I am part of God and how to pray to God, etc. So there was one point, new point, I believe, which Zohar introduced, that God is like this. I want to emphasize again that this particle-wave duality is my invention. It is not yet published anywhere, but I believe it is almost the right concept, that under definite circumstances God is everywhere, but for our specific activity at specific time, we can consider like God to be separated as somewhere outside of us and we outside of God. So this was second point concerning Zohar I wanted to point out today. And another point which new things which Zohar introduced is Shekinah as feminine part of God. Now, from where Shekinah comes? Some people say that Shekinah appears already in Genesis, no, in Exodus, where Moses is talking to burning bush, asking him, what should I say? Who sent me? And God did not give any answer, any picture, what he wanted to know about God. God tell him, Ehyeh asher ehyeh, which means I will be what I will be. So basically that God is not defined, cannot be defined. God is telling him, I will not define myself what I am, I will be what I will be. And this gives possibility that God is really, feminine part and masculine part. Now, the name of God, which is in Sephirah, in Tiferet, is Yud He Vav He, Yud He Vav, and another He. Now, I will not write full He, because I know, according to rabbinic teaching, if you write Yud He Vav He on piece of paper, you cannot throw it away. You have to bury it somewhere in backyard of synagogue, and similarly probably from blackboard. I remember like 3 years ago I wrote the name of the God on blackboard, and Rabbi left it there, nobody erased blackboard for 2-3 months until I took a razor and erased it myself. So I will not do it here, but you can imagine this is hair. Here is the last leg missing. I just don't want to write it. Now, how we get feminine part from that? This is, some rabbis suggest, take this out. And read it backward. Read it backward. What it is? You get Dodi, right? L'chadodi, right? And Dodi means what? Dodi means my beloved one. So Dodi means Shekinah, feminine part of God. That's Dodi. So rabbis say that already in the name, Yud He Vav He, we have Shekinah present. You just take these 2 lines out, and you have Dodi, which is my beloved, which is Shekinah. Now, I want to say that Zohar is not like textbook of spirituality. They don't explain anything like I am trying to explain. It is just set of stories. And some stories are simple to understand, and some stories are, I would say, not impossible, but difficult to understand. And even more, it looks like that Zohar was really written by few people with different opinion on various things. So we have even one story saying something, and we have another story telling just opposite. So Zohar does not present answers clearly, and people who study Zohar probably can always find some part which support their own opinion, another part which contradict their opinion. So Zohar emphasizes, be open-minded. And Zohar, I mentioned before, is really difficult to read. It's difficult to learn from Zohar. I read only 3 parsha, okay? I read Genesis, Bereshit. I read Lech Lecha, and after Lech Lecha we have Vayera. He appeared. So whatever I am presenting is just what I was able to absorb from these 3 parsha, right? We have how many parsha altogether in Torah? About 52, right? So I still have 49 parsha left. New translation by Daniel Matt has 12 volumes, and I read just first 2, basically. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you concerning Zohar, what I left out before. What we will do now is a short meditation. You remember 3 weeks ago in the first lecture, we did meditation with the mantra Yah-Hu. Yah is one of the names of the God, and Hu in Hebrew means He. So Yah-Hu means He is God or God is He. And we did it in several parts. As we breathe in, we say, we whisper Yah. As we breathe out, Hu. So we will do just observing your breath, how it goes. You can feel air coming in on your nose, tip of your nose, and then you can feel again breath going out on the tip of your nose. So let us start. Yah. Okay, now we will continue doing the same Yahu, but we add concentration on your third eye. On this point here, point connecting basically Chokhmah to Bina and intersect with Keter Dad. Okay? So this point is just middle on your forehead. concentrate on third eye, and when we say who, we concentrate on base of our spine. It is connection between Keter, which is Yah, and who is Malkut. And Malkut is at the base of our spine. And as we shift between Keter and Malkut, our concentration should be on our spine, and we should feel how it goes down through our spine, and our concentration go again up through the spine. You may do it more slowly than before, that you have time really not just jump from Malkut to Keter, but really go slowly on this path through Tiferet and to Keter. Rabbi say that our goal is basically to bring together Malkut and Tiferet, but eventually Malkut and Keter. Okay? So we do again same Yah and who, but try, I know it takes practice, but try to feel how your concentration goes through the spine, up and down. Okay, so let us start. Okay, again. Yah. Thank you very much. And now, while we remain in kind of meditation mood, Windy will play for us on the flute some meditative melody. Music is one of the forms of meditation, either to play or to listen to music with full concentration. part of meditation. You get away from your thoughts. So we can open our eyes and come back to this room that I will not completely open. So we did meditation on Yah and Hu. Some rabbis say that you can meditate really on the name of God, that you can really use in meditation Yahweh, Yahweh. Especially if you don't pronounce it only in whisper or just say it in your mind. However, if you ask any rabbi, they will tell you probably, we don't pronounce, we don't say the name Yahweh. You ask that, have you ever asked Rabbi why we don't pronounce that name? I asked few times and I did not get any reasonable answer. It is written, Yahweh in Torah probably several hundred times. And if God did not want us to pronounce it, why he would write it? But then I found one book published in 1250 by Rabbi Yosef Gikatila. Yosef Gikatila. And the name of the book is Sha'arei Ora. Sha'arei means gates, and Ora means light. So it is gates of light. And he wrote his book and let other people know it was few decades before Zohar. And I suspect myself that he was one of the group of people around Moses de Leon who published the Zohar. So I suspect he was one of the circle who really created story of Zohar. And Gikatila says to his students in that book, you don't pronounce Yahweh. And he explained that if you pronounce Yahweh, God listens to you, and all your karma, basically your repaying for good deeds and bad deeds, will be released immediately on you. So he said you have to be very careful, because if you pronounce Yahweh in your meditation, you can get sick and you can die. He said that if you get anyone who is seriously sick, he said there is a heavenly council who is called at that moment. And your soul is invited to that council to present your good deeds and your bad deeds. And council weighed now your bad deeds and good deeds together. And if bad deeds prevail, when you are seriously sick, you will die. But when good deeds prevail, then you will recover. So, for a couple of years, I used meditation Yahweh. And about a year and a half ago, I got seriously sick really. You may not know, I got heart attack and many other complications after that. Rabbi probably remember last year I was not able to come to last sessions. I have 4 lectures and people asked me for more. So I agreed to give lecture 5 and 6. But at the time of lecture lesson 5, I fainted, etc., etc. I recovered in a day or 2, so Heavenly Council recognized my effort and don't let me die. But it was quite close. So because of that, I cannot recommend that you use the Yahweh in your meditation. It is safer probably to use Yahoo.
So in the rabbinic, in the Orthodox world, they use Yud instead of the letters that you use. They do Yud K. Instead of the H, they change it to a Kuf.
That's correct. In the writing, and also Elohim, they write Elohim, right, etc. So they change some word that it is not exactly name of God, but that we still understand what they mean. Okay, so I believe here I would finish my presentation of Zohar, and I come to topic of today's lecture, which is duty of the man. You may remember from the first lecture, you remember my interpretation of the second day of creation. You remember that on second day, God said, let there be Rakia, which separates water above Rakia from water below Rakia. So it really created the world of Yetzirah, which separates heaven, which is Beria, from earth, which is Azir. And on second day, God also look after he said, let there be Rakia, and there was nothing happened. You know, on the first day, God said, let there be light, and there was light. On the second day, Elohim said, let there be Rakia, and nothing happened. So what he did, he went to make Rakia. So it was more complicated than on the first day. And then Elohim had meeting in the day number 6. One of them suggested, let us make man in our image and in our likeness. How discussion went in this group, we don't know. But we know the result, because it says after that, Elohim made man in his image, not in his likeness. And we said it is due to man to build up now himself in the likeness of God. He is just created as an image. It means he has potential to be like God. We said God manifests to us in the form of Sephirot, of the Etz Chaim, of the tree of life. And we said also this is model of human soul. And man can modify his soul in such a way that he goes from Malkut, from the lowest Sephira, to Keter, to La, to highest Sephira, and become like a God. So, goal of man was reconnect earth to heaven. Because soul of man spent all Kabbalistic world, from Asiya to Yetzirah, to Beria, and to Atzilut. All this is a human soul, and we said again, human soul have different parts, and we name them in different words, going from Nefesh to Neshama. So, duty of man in this life is to work on his soul, that he can reconnect the earth to heaven. And the man is only creature created by God who can do it. And here, I forgot, Zohar also says that God needs a man. God now needs the man to reconnect this world. And man, by his action, by his speech, and by his thought, it does not only him, he affects everybody else living on the earth. In addition, he affects all other worlds, all spiritual worlds. So your actions affect all the worlds. Your speech affects the spiritual worlds. Your thought, very important, affects all spiritual world again. So man has to be very careful. You probably know that it is not so difficult to control your body, control your action. It is more difficult to control your speech, of course. And it is next to impossible to control your thoughts. But Kabbalah tells us, regardless of that, you have to train yourself and eventually control your thoughts. Because your thoughts can cause havoc in this world as well as in higher worlds. We talked about that each bad thought creates demon in Yetzirah, which backward affects you. But not only you, it affects your neighbor, it affects all the nation, and it affects all mankind. So our thoughts have creative power, which we have to learn how to control. So it is general principle what is task of man. And now I somehow like how this process of purifying yourself is described by Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lutzatto. Moshe Chaim Lutzatto, he lived in 18th century, and he had considerable influence on Hasidic movement established by Baal Shem Tov, as well as a great influence on Kabbalists in northern part of Europe, in Latvia, Estonia, and that part, Lithuania, where was Gaon of Vilna, which fought very strongly against Baal Shem Tov. And Lutzatto have really effect on both of them. And Lutzatto, he divides things which we have to do into three basic groups. First group, he calls what most frequently occurs, what man does most frequently. And it has, again, three parts. First part, he said, is stealing. Second part is promiscuity. The third part is, what is the third part? You have it written.
Eating.
What is this?
Eating.
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 Right, okay. So it is stealing, promiscuity, and eating. And he put them in this order. The most frequent is stealing. Now, he also said, we of course don't know to rob a bank. Most of us don't do it. On the other hand, if we are involved in business, whatever kind of business it is, we love to get as much profit from any business deal as we can, regardless whether it is fair to our counterpart in that business transaction. So he said in business, we have tendency to steal from other people as much as we can. And he gives their example, like somebody is selling some article, so he described to potential buyer how good the article is, and he forget to list disadvantages of that article compared to others. So if you just praise one side of the goods which you have for sale and don't mention the other side, here he says that's stealing. And he said most of people, they have tendency to steal. And for that, what is involved in stealing are your hands. And that is why, Orthodox Jews, what they do early morning, they take a bowl of water and put it on your left hand, on your right hand, and do it 3 times, and it basically removes the evil which during the night concentrated in their hands, and hopefully it will keep their hands clean for the rest of the day. So that's stealing, and he said in some hidden form, not so obvious form, most of us have tendency to steal. Second thing which he emphasizes is promiscuity. And here he says, even if you control your action to stay away from sexual misbehavior, still your thought on that basically damages you. And your thoughts, your intention, even if you control it physically, still brings sin into your soul. And that, if you look in today's society, I would almost say that promiscuity is more important and more frequent than even stealing. But in his time, like in the 18th century, he said stealing is most frequent, after that is promiscuity. So promiscuity is not only doing the physical thing, it is whenever it occurs in your head, anything like that. That's immediately what you have to distance yourself from. And he said if you practice distancing, basically if thought occur, you cannot prevent it, but basically don't feed it, don't stay with it. Immediately start thinking about something else. And if you do it consistently, probably for a few decades, maybe your mind will get used not to do it anymore. And the third part of this most frequent was, he said, eating. He, of course, emphasizes eating food which is not kosher. But we have seen, I believe, few lectures, I read you part of Zohar, where Zohar argues very strongly against eating meat, both from physical point of view, that these animalistic cells become cells of your body. And they said then you have the same animal tendencies as animal has. And we also talk about spiritual reason for not eating a meat, which was killing the living things, killing animals. We said that whenever animal is dying in fear, being afraid of what is coming and having no escape, this hopelessness combined with fear creates a demon in the work of Yetzirah. And those demons we create as mankind, millions of them each day, that then prevent our prayers to rise towards divine, and in addition they affect back us with their darkness, and we get depressed, we get animal-like behavior, and basically forget divine. So Zohar emphasizes not eating meat, and we said for us it will be sufficient, to start cutting down on consumption of meat. So this is first group, which Lutzatto said these are things which most frequently occur. Second group is, he said, what man is causing wrong in his association with other men. And there he'll list, verbal abuse, like shaming somebody publicly and not before the other people, or just not answering great greeting, Verbal abuse can have many forms, and we have to be careful not get involved in them. I have to look where is others. What is the list? I gave you the list, but I don't remember them all. Giving wrong or incomplete advice. Well, we know what is wrong advice, obviously, but even if somebody asks you for advice and you give him partial information, you withheld some part of information which you have. He said that's basically very negative. If you are giving advice, you have to put on the table all what you know, good thing as well as bad thing. Now, gossip and slander. Some other rabbi, he writes, many people are guilty of stealing. Few people are guilty of sexual behavior. And he said, but almost all of us are guilty of gossip. If you go through your memory, do you remember sometimes that you were gossiping? Gossiping does not mean lying or spreading news which is not true. Gossiping is also spreading news which is correct, which is true, but which that other person has no need to know that. If you know that your neighbor's son, he flunked his exam, I don't know, at college or whatever, you heard it, and now you take it to your another neighbor, say it to him. You had no need to know it. It is true that he flunked his exam, but telling to somebody else, that's gossip. And some religion does not recognize gossip as being harmful. Some people consider gossip to be a normal subject of their talk. They meet friends, so of course they want to tell him everything they know about everybody else. Otherwise they will have nothing to talk about. At all times when Rabbi meant and other people meant, they discuss Torah and interpretation of Torah. Today, we have just gossip about this politician, that politician, this neighbor, etc. And some rabbis say that gossip is worse than stealing. You know why? If you steal something, you can return it to the person and even give him additional compensation. But if you spread gossip about someone, there is no way how to take it back. There is from Muslim tradition, there is a story about Muhammad. One guy to Muhammad and said, I want to tell you something and I pray for forgiveness. And he told me I was engaged in gossip to many people. What can you do for me? And Muhammad tells him, come tomorrow and bring bag of tiny feathers. Tiny feathers. So next day, guy comes to Muhammad with his bag of tiny feathers. And he tells him, now go through the city, through all streets, and before each door on the threshold, you put one feather there, in each house. It took a lot of time because it was quite a large city, but guy did it, he put there. And Muhammad told him, we'll come back tomorrow. So next day he came again to Muhammad for what else he can do, and now Muhammad tells him, now go and collect all these feathers. So he goes, and of course, feathers are gone. Wind takes them away. He is unable to bring Muhammad a single feather back. And Muhammad tells him, and that's the same with gossip. So that's why some rabbis say gossip is greater transgression than stealing.
It harms three people.
Hmm?
It harms the person you're talking about, it harms the person you're telling, and it harms you. According to
Yeah, so it has this second part, in company man, it has several more. Next one listed is vengeance. Vengeance is opposite what we talked about quite extensively, which is forgiveness. It is that God gave you the power to forgive sins, and you are very stingy with that. You don't want to use that power. You have power to forget sins, sins which other people committed against you. You don't have to wait until someone comes back to you and asks you for forgiveness. No, it is your duty to forgive them each day. Whoever did something wrong to you, it is your duty each day to forgive them all. If you don't do it, you are just like throwing away the power, some gold which God gave to you. You said, I will not use it. And by not using it, you are committing a sin. And you can imagine everybody would do it each day. There would be no grudge left for the second day. There would be nothing left. So why not start doing this immediately? Next one, which people do when interact with contact in other people, is lying. Well, what is lying, obviously we know. This is like obvious lying if somebody does not speak true. But even when we mix true and we just make it a little bit favorable let us to our behavior in that, we modify the truth a little bit, it is still lying. There are, of course, people who make their profession lying, right, deceiving others and getting a living out of that. But even we, so-called honest people, we have tendency to, when we describe in past what happened, when we have conflict with someone else, we are trying to paint ourselves in more favorable light. And that's part of lying, not being honest. And the last part which Lutzatto lists in this category is keeping Shabbat. Basically, I believe it is very important to take one day off your all ordinary work. From all work and all thinking which you can do during the weekdays. Take one day off and try not only your action, even your thoughts, to be concentrated on spiritual things and on God. And don't think what you have to do tomorrow at work. If you are thinking what you have to next day, what always do, or to plan how you will do it, that's violation of Shabbat. So Shabbat means to stay away not only from action, stay away from planning what you will do. So this finishes the second group of transgression, which men does with other men. And the third one, which he lists, is basically changing our character, building our character. And here, first one is pride. So we talked about pride, I believe, last 2 years in summer. We went through all these things which constitute musar, which is basically discipline of building your character. We all have our pride, right? We want to be appreciated. We want other people to like us. So we have to be careful with that. Second was anger. Rabbis say, I know some Jews said that anger is justified in some cases. But they probably don't know what is anger. Because anger is an emotional state when you forget God, forget everything, and you are just angry. This can never be justified. And Maimonides said, middle part in all other things is okay, but not in anger. You have to completely eradicate anger. Because in anger you really, have you seen two people arguing and really being angry on each other? You may notice they are completely different when in normal state of mind. They are like possessed in some demon. So anger completely eliminate anger. Don't find any intellectual justification that you have a right to be angry. You never have a right to be angry. You have a right to correct things which you think are wrong. Of course you have that right, but you don't have a right being angry. Because being angry, you forget completely God and you forget even yourself. It is like somebody else using your mind and your body. Envy. I believe you all know what is envy, right? Your neighbor has a bigger car, you want to have a bigger car, your fellow employee gets higher salary increase than you get, and you think, all that I should get, all that should be mine. Somebody is rich, he has a big house, etc., etc. You have to realize that there is nothing to envy anybody else, because you have your soul, you have your spiritual life, and that is much more valuable than any physical property. Lust. Well, lust is basically, again, forgetting God and being completely carried away by your feeling of pleasure and thinking that pleasure is the most important thing to have. So whatever takes you away from thinking of God, thinking of your soul, and of higher spiritual level, is basically very harmful to you. And the last one, which is here in the list is honors. Looking for honors. Basically getting recognition for your work. If you look for recognition of your work, and if you feel good, I did something good, that's harmful to you. You should never have such a thought even. One of my early teachers in Hinduism, he told us, whatever man remembers, God forgets. And whatever man forgets, God remembers. So if you do something good and you remember it, you already had your reward. God forgets it. He does not consider it at all. But if you do something good and you forget it, that's something which God remembers, which will be on your account. Okay. And these all things which I enumerate to you, to acquire it will take several lifetimes probably. But this is what makes you a tzaddik, which makes you a righteous person. Most of people can be satisfied with becoming righteous. It means to satisfy, fulfill all commandments of Torah, and you are righteous. And Lutzatto here again puts even righteousness, even tzaddik, at two different levels. Tzaddik hatov and tzaddik hara, which means tzaddik good and tzaddik not so good. And he said, if you look on physical behavior, there is no difference between those two. They all do the same thing. But tzaddik hara, not so good tzaddik, he controls his impulses, he controls his thoughts, which he translates into action, etc. So if bad thought come to tzaddik hara, like thought, let us say, of sexual misbehavior, tzaddik hara is able to suppress that thought throw it away and not to act about it. That's a not so good tzaddik. What is good tzaddik, of course? Someone who in the same situation does get even the thought about his possible misbehavior. He doesn't have to reject his thought. He doesn't have to say, this is forbidden by Torah, because of that I don't do it. He is so much trained, he simply don't get thoughts like that. So this is level of tzaddik, 2 levels. And now come sanctification on the path to holiness. And Lutzatto said here, what is first condition of the path of holiness is abstention. An abstention of something which is otherwise permitted. It means you don't, the rabbis say commandments of Torah, they are just basic things. It is the minimum what you have to do. But to sanctify yourself, you have to do more than that. You have to abstain of something, at least for a period of time, which is permitted. You don't have to abstain forever, right? But for several months, several years. Example is eating, right? Eating to support your body is, of course, permitted. If you eat kosher food, of course it is permitted. But on the way of sanctification, what you can do, you can fast 1 day a week. You can put 1 day where you simply will not eat for 36 hours. That you have dinner of 1 day, you don't eat anything 2nd day, and then you have breakfast on the 3rd day. If you are healthy and in possession of your strength, it is something which you can easily do. And it is part of sanctification. You abstain from that which is permitted. And similarly it goes with other part of the life, like speech, right? Not to talk too much. Learn how to be silent. Again, one of my early teachers in Hinduism told us, more you talked about your spiritual experiences, less they will happen in the future. More you talked about what your dream were, how beautiful it was, less you will have those dreams in the future. So it is again abstention from speech, abstention from telling everybody what progress you made. And social contact, here is clear. He said going to the meeting, going to the parties, cut it to the complete minimum. Because this will again encourage you to do other things. Second is piety. Piety basically is high regard for divine. Never use divine name in vain. Never try to diminish God or anything divine in your life, in your contact with others. Purity of thoughts, we already talked about it. Humility. But I said to sanctify yourself is only part of the path. Rabbi says, sanctify yourself a little, and you will be sanctified a lot with the help from above. You make first step toward the holiness, And angels and God and other spiritual entity will help you to keep that step and make another step. And final step of holiness is, of course, grace of God. What you are building is just showing that you may be worth holiness, but you cannot enforce holiness to come on you. Holiness is connected to these two sephirot, to Chokhmah and Bina. And we can come with our sanctification to that, to this sephirah. And the influx from Bina, Chokhmah, Keter comes only as a grace of God. And they say in the past, in biblical times, there were school of prophets. And school of prophets, boys are trained from early childhood to do all that, to become tzaddik and to sanctify themselves, to bring them to the Sephirah Dat, so they may be worthy if God decides to make them prophets. But nobody could force or gain prophecy on their own effort. They have to wait for God. I think my time is over. In the last page I had summary of the course basically. Let me just say a few sentences. You remember, Kabbalah is composed of three basic things. Intellectual study of the universe and our soul, meditation, second part, and third part is rebuilding yourself, to making yourself tzaddik and go on the path to sanctification. So there are three parts of Kabbalah. And I suggested 4 basic simple steps how to start your path, right? You remember what was first one? Get a dog. And if you already have a dog, get the second one. And the first thing, it will teach you how to give unconditional love without expecting anything in return. And then you can practice the same thing towards all other human beings. But to understand what is selfless love, for that you really need to have a dog.
Or a horse.
Second part, what we can do ourselves was salicha, which was forgetting these sins others did against us. Third part was meditation. We did not do too many meditation. We did maybe just 1 or 2. It does not matter how many meditation you know. What matters, you can pick up one and do that one for a year. But do it each day 10 minutes minimum, 10 to 15 minutes. We use this Yahoo. So stay with Yahoo for a year. But train yourself to do it each day. Even if you'd feel impossible, I cannot do it, just do it each day. And fourth one was reduce consumption of meat. So there are simple things which I think everybody can do without too much help or too much changing your life. Lord, we thank you for this opportunity. We thank you for your support of our thinking. We pray to you that Ruach HaKodesh stay with us whenever we study Torah. That it open our eyes and we can see deep inside, beyond the dress of the Torah, beyond the stories. that we are able to extract your thought and your commandments hidden